be sure to go to flipsidegaming.com and use promo code 6 for 10% off on orders over $10. It's a good deal and helps support the show. What is up, Planeswalkers? Theoric 6 back with some more Magic the Gathering. However, today we're not playing any arena. What I'm doing today is going through 15 of the cards that are going to be rotating soon with the release of Throne of Eldraine in the fall, and my thoughts on some of them. Now, the first half are going to be cards that I'm essentially very glad to see go, and then the second half I'll talk about some of the cards that I sometimes surprisingly I'm gonna miss. I'm gonna miss some of those cards. But let's start off with kind of the good old elephant in the room, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Now, if you would have asked me before War of the Spark came out if I hate this card, the answer would have been yes. A resounding yes. It is played in essentially any deck that plays white-blue and wants to be controlling. More so at that time before War came out, because War introduced an even more annoying Planeswalker in Small Teferi, or 3-Fairy, or Teferi spelled with a 3 as one of the E's, which I can't actually, like, verbally state, but whatever. Now that that card is more of a headache, I actually don't mind this one nearly as much. Additionally, we do have other tools. Since War of the Spark came out with a bunch of Planeswalkers, it gave us a decent number of ways to deal with them. However, Teferi, it does still have that legacy. Also, speaking of legacy, it's played in Modern and Legacy. I think actually at this point in Legacy, it might be once again overrun by 3-mana Teferi, but the fact that this card sees any play at all in Eternal formats just shows the actual power level of this card. And it is going to be a good thing when this card rotates. And, you know, those annoying Esper decks are going to be a little bit less viable. Next up, I'll talk about Curious Obsession. This is a card that I just loathe. I loathe this card. And the deck that it creates. So, I've never really been a huge fan of Protect the Queen strategies. These are decks that essentially try and get a single or a couple threats out, and then just do everything in their power to stop their opponents from playing. I did at one point have a, what is his name? Earl the Miststalker, EDH deck, Voltron. Voltron is not my kind of strategy. I don't love having one thing and put all of my resources into that one thing, and then just force my opponents to deal with that one card, and then that's it. I hate even more, since, I mean, he was Naya, right? I was still interacting with my opponents in ways that they could cast spells, but Curious Obsession just made Mono Blue Tempo a nightmare. And of course, Mono Blue Tempo right now isn't much of a thing. It's kind of been supplanted, I think that's the word I want to use, by Simic Flash or other Flash variants, as well as just having kind of a not as great time against the field as a whole. So even though Tempo is not really dominant in the format, I'm still super glad that they're losing a lot of their cards. Not only are they losing Curious Obsession, they're also losing Tempest Djinn. They're losing Charter Course. You know, that's a card that's going. And actually, Charter Course is going to impact more than just Tempo, because Charter Course is going to also hit things like the reanimation decks that want to be able to chuck cards from their hand into the library. Now, obviously, or into the graveyard. Now, obviously, you can still run, you know, the good old-fashioned Honor the God Pharaoh and its ilk, but being able to not run red is now a bit diminished thanks to some cards like Charter Course going. But I'm very excited for Curious Obsession going away, because I hated games where my opponent had a good old turn 1 creature into turn 2 Curious Obsession and just had counters for days. Those days are going to be long behind us, and I cannot wait. For those of you who only play Best of 1 on Arena, you may not, and who are relatively new, you may not know the menace that is Nexus of Fate. Nexus of Fate is a card which was printed as a buy a box promo. Now, what this means is you couldn't get Nexus of Fate in packs. You can only get this as a promotional thing from pre-ordering a box from your local game store. That means when this card started seeing play everywhere, its price got real high. Now in Arena, obviously, you're not purchasing singles of cards, but this is still a 7-mana instant speed take an extra turn card. Now, if you look at other take an extra turn cards that Wizards has printed, even in the most recent of years, they're usually not instants. They're very usually sorceries, and not only do they not return themselves to the graveyard or to the library from wherever the hell this goes, they exile themselves typically, so that if you do get an extra turn with this card, you can abuse it and reuse it again. For some reason, Wizards decided, hey, you know that clause that we put on all of our extra turn effects? Because we don't want people, you know, breaking anything. Let's not only remove it, but let's flip it and reverse it. And this essentially is what they've been doing to us. I have no idea who greenlit this card, who thought this would be a good idea. It being just an instant would have been maybe okay. Instant exiles itself when it resolves, sure. If it was a sorcery and still shuffled itself in, I think that would be a little more egregious, but also then you wouldn't have to deal with the good old looping with Wilderness Reclamations, because you can just do that at the end of your turn, even though you've used all your mana. One or the other would have been fine. Still would have been played, but it would have been fine. Doing it the way they did it just led for a terrible, terrible feels. And, of course, the fact of the matter is this is a playable as hell buy box promo that hopefully Wizards is not going to repeat. Now, it doesn't seem like they have. You know, they've been printing interesting buy box promos, and I think that's the way to go. Like Tezzeret, the 6 mana Tezzeret that we just recently got, I think that is the correct level, right? Tezzeret is a decent card, but it only goes in a very certain subset of decks that isn't technically, you know, it's not ubiquitous, so it has to go into a certain subset, which I just said. But also, it isn't supported within, it isn't supported directly within the set that it's printed, right? It's not like in War of the Spark, you're getting a ton of artifacts, right? There are some here and there, but, you know, it helps. I'm talking about Nexus too damn much. I'm glad it's leaving. Champion of Dusk. Now, Champion of Dusk, obviously, is not the only vampire that's leaving. There are a decent number of, most of them, that are leaving, because Ixalan is what had them. However, there are still a decent number of okay vampires in the format right now. The main ones being, of course, the 1 mana card, Legion Man of... Who knows? I don't know. 1 mana, 1/2. I don't remember the name of that damn card. I literally just looked up a list of all of the good old-fashioned vampires who are still in Standard, but I forgot what that one. Anyway, there's still a couple of those. You know, there's also Cruel Celebrant, which means that theoretically, as long as, well, I doubt Throne of Eldraine will have vampires, but still, at a certain point, the 2 other Sorens may still find play, right? But they'll be much less powerful because specifically Champion of Dusk will be gone. You know, losing a Danto Ven card not only hurts the vampire decks, it also hurts a lot of the other decks that want to have a bit of an aggressive element in the white colors. And Legion, what the hell? Legion of Dusk? The Lord, I don't remember the damn name of that card because I don't play vampires. But their Lord is, you know, also a bit of an issue because now you can't pump the team, right? But the real backbone of the current vampire deck is Champion of Dusk, because it allows you to just vomit your hand constantly and still be able to gain more card advantage than your opponent in your aggro deck. Excuse my beard, it's just a mess right now. It's in that weird growing phase. But yeah, I'm very excited to see this card leave. Honestly, I would allow all of the other vampires to stay to just lose this card now. But, you know, I'm not in charge of the way Wizards operates, so it's whatever. But Champion of Dusk, I'm super glad to see leave. And it's not because I don't like vampires. I think vampires are really interesting. I think they're a cool tribe. I just think that an aggro deck being able to outvalue an opponent is not cool. I don't know. Wacky idea, I know. Autofocus, will you calm down? Reckless Rage. I think this card... I've not seen people talk about the fact that Feather's losing this card. Like, yes, we have God's Willing, and because of God's Willing and a lot of the other cards being from the Ravnica block, I think that Feather can still exist, but losing this premium removal for that deck, I think is a lot more impactful than people give it credit for. This is an instant speed deal 4 to a creature, and because of the fact that a lot of your creatures do not care about taking 2 damage, and sometimes want to take damage, I think the fact that people are just sleeping on this card leaving is kind of criminal. You know, we've seen a lot of Naya Feather lists running around recently. You still see Boros Feather lists. This card's important. This card, I think, is going to be a lot more impactful than some people realize. And I mean, luckily, it's not a super expensive deck. You know, if you're considering paper, the Naya one's a little bit harder because of the mana base, but you know, luckily it's not too big of a deal. However, this card leaving is going to cripple Feather decks unless they get another really good source of removal, because the other removal that they have options for, it doesn't work well with the deck. You know, it doesn't mesh as well. Obviously, this is not great if you don't have a creature out, but if you don't have a creature out in that deck, you're probably screwed anyway. So I think that Reckless Rage is going to leave. And why is it in the area of things I like that are leaving? Because Feather is also kind of a deck that's like tempo, like protect the queen. It's not my jam. Chain Ruler. Now, once again, like Teferi, big Teferi. If you had asked me a while ago, before war, if I thought Chain Ruler was awful and should be banned, easy yes. Super easy yes for me. But now, I feel like it's outclassed by things. You know, Steamkin is very obviously the powerhouse of red right now. And although Chain Ruler is still great, still sees play, etc., it's not nearly as strong as it was in the past. And that is because the metagame has shifted in such a way that Chain Ruler's dealing 1 damage isn't nearly as impactful. Now, obviously, this is still a Nightmare card. And the reason it's a Nightmare card is because of the fact that it just kind of negates token strategies, right? It makes it very hard for you to be playing with, token decks that don't have large tokens. Obviously, that's not always going to be a great move anyway. But with Selesnya's Convoke mechanic, it does mean that it was already a little bit harder for that deck to play a more mid-range strategy, being able to just go super wide and murder your opponents. I did have to kind of play a little bit more aggressive, play things like Loxodon and Marshall in some cases, but not Marshall. But the fact that this is going away is great for many things and kind of bad for others. And the main reason it's bad is because this card does keep Hero of Precinct 1 a little bit in check. Obviously not super well, but the fact that this is able to just indiscriminately wipe out some tokens from that deck specifically means that we may see an era where Hero of Precinct 1 gets even better because of Chain Ruler. Now, that said, obviously all of these predictions and discussion about the future of the metagame after these cards rotate out, it does not take into account what we get in Throne of Eldraine. And from what I've heard, Throne of Eldraine isn't, remotely multicolor. In fact, if I recall correctly, people have kind of insinuated that it's a lot more single color focus. Like, not just like that it's not multicolored, it's that it's specifically single color focus. So that could shake things up, right? If Hero of Precinct 1 just gets no tools and a bunch of new decks do, that means Hero can obviously go by the wayside. But since Ravnica has given us so many things for a hero to play with, losing Chain Ruler in that situation does mean it's a little unfortunate. But Chain Ruler, I'm overall glad is leaving because, honestly, it's mostly because of First Strike. That just made it so freaking annoying to block. Llanowar Elves. Why is Llanowar Elves in the cards that I'm glad are leaving? Because it makes turn 3 and turn 4 Nissa's real easy, and I don't like that shit. Now, ramp is okay, right? I'll admit, ramp is cool. Sure, whatever. You get to play your big things, but when you have a deck like Simic Ramp that's going around right now with the Goddess of God hands, and you just get screwed, it feels real bad. And I think the Llanowar Elves, it's one of those cards that is incredibly powerful, very similar to Lightning Bolt, where we have seen Lightning Bolt in the past. We've seen a time when Llanowar Elf wasn't in play, wasn't printed, and those metagames were very different because of those cards, right? Lightning Bolt, Llanowar Elf, they changed the landscape of the metagame because of how basal they are, how much of a bedrock they are to the metagame, right? Without Llanowar Elves, these ramp decks are going to take a severe hit. Not being able to play a card that is guaranteed to give you mana even into the late game, right? Arboreal Grazer, obviously, it's a 0/3, can technically ramp you. But it can only do that a certain number of times, essentially, once. And in the late game, you still can't add more mana to it, right? If you have no lands in hand, your Arboreal Grazer does nothing. And functionally, Arboreal Grazer, it does functionally ramp you, but it doesn't add more to your overall mana count, right? Like, in a game where you draw 3 lands and a Llanowar Elf, you have 4 mana. In a game where you draw 3 lands and an Arboreal Elf, you have... Did I say 3 mana? Llanowar Elf, 3 lands, you have 4 mana. Arboreal Grazer, 3 lands, 3 mana. So there's a difference, and I think it's incredibly impactful. Now, the last card on this list would not have been on this list a little while ago. This is a card from M19. This card has been around for a while, and it's only now a problem because Field of the Dead. This card, in my opinion, super fun. It's a reprint. The reprint is, a modern legal card. It was at one point a super popular modern deck. Go Volk, Escape Shift. But because of Field of the Dead, this card is bonkers. It just enables that. It's not even inevitability. It just enables the good old-fashioned, oh, you're dead now. And obviously, I don't think there's anything wrong with Scapeshift. I also don't think there's anything wrong with Field of the Dead, right? And it's possible that Wizards had Field of the Dead slated for possibly an earlier release, but they knew they wanted to reprint Scapeshift, and then they're like, okay, we should space these out so that they're only going to be in Standard for a little while. Because only together are they actually horribly annoying. I do think Field of the Dead is still going to see some presence in Standard, and the main reason for that is we still are going to have Circuitous Roots. We're still going to have other cards that fetch lands and put them in the graveyard, or put them into play. But we're not going to be able to just get a chunk of them at once and get a bunch of Field of the Deads and have them all trigger at once, make a giant board in a single step. It's going to be, in my opinion, if it still lives, it's going to be a deck that is making zombies here and there. It cares about lands. It's still a ramping deck. You know, it's still going to be probably playing Hydro Crates and things like that. But it's going to be a lot more fair in that it's just going to be accruing advantage over time, not bursting you out of nowhere. So Scapeshift leaving is kind of bittersweet because I do like the Yarok plus Dread Presence deck that I've built because it's meme and fun. But the band Scapeshift decks are way too ubiquitous right now. They're very frustrating. Whenever Standard is at a point where there's about maybe 4 decks that you see constantly, especially in unranked, and of course I am talking about Arena right now. It is different in Paper Magic Tabletop. It just gets really annoying to play as not only a content creator, but I've talked to my community, and it's just not fun when you're playing the same decks. Losing aside, it's when, even if you're winning against the exact same decks all the time, when you're someone who wants to play the game and have fun playing the game, that is less fun than it would be to lose more and play a wider variety, at least from myself and the people I've talked to. Moving on to the cards that I'm actually going to miss seeing, Ixalan's Binding. This card, now, this isn't a huge card. This is just an enchantment that removes something and makes it so your opponents can't cast more of those. It's very, kind of just there. It's just a blip. But the fact that this could deal with a permanent and make it so your opponents can't get more value out of that permanent, or cards with the same name, is really helpful for white-based decks, or even white splash decks, to be able to deal with specifically Planeswalkers, right? But the scope of what this could handle was really nice. And it forced your opponent to actually do something about it, right? Your opponent very obviously could get rid of this in some way. But if they don't use something, if they don't use a card to get rid of this, they can't just ignore it, right? If you Prison Realm a Chandra, right? Your opponent can still play another Chandra. If you Ixalan's Binding that Chandra, they can't play those Chandras until they get rid of Ixalan's Binding. And depending on the color combination, sometimes they can't. So I'm actually going to miss Ixalan's Binding. I think there's a theme with the cards I have. A lot of them I think are removal. I'm just a guy who likes taking cards away from opponents. Speaking of removal, let's start the Wreckage. This card, one of my first videos on this channel, and you can totally go back and check it out. I'm not sure which, but I did not play Standard until Arena came out. By the time, or until Arena came into closed beta and stuff. And by the time that I started playing, I hadn't known about the Ixalan cards very much. I didn't know about Settle the Wreckage. I got with Settle the Wreckage. That was my first experience with the card, is me getting got. I didn't read it. When I was going through the collection and whatnot, I didn't play it on my opponent. I got by it. But Settle the Wreckage is still a very, very helpful card, because what it does, it allows creature decks, both aggressive and mid-range, to be able to fight against other creature decks without losing too much, right? Obviously, you have to play this card. And in certain situations, if you're a creature deck and you're ahead, this card's dead. But that's fine, because you're ahead. But if you're behind, you get to have some insurance against another creature deck. And I think that's very helpful for, honestly, for not only the aggressive decks, but I don't play those, but for the mid-range creature decks that want to be in white, that don't want to be playing traditional board wipes, but still recognize that, let's say we're going against green, Stompy, for example, that deck probably is going to have bigger creatures than you. And being able to have something that deals with their board and still keeps the pressure on them is very helpful. So I'm going to be a little sad that this goes away. Sorcerer's Canto. it's a control card, but gosh dang it, I love this card. The card selection is so good. I love it. And then you just have a land that can gain resources over time. It's so fun. Obviously, it's not great when your control opponent has it against you. If your opponent's getting Nexus off this, just concede. But and I'm probably going to be one of the few people who enjoy this. In control mirrors that aren't Nexus based, it is so fun being able to just it's like it's a Mexican standoff where you just you're both holding these Ascanta triggers and you're just like, I've got so many cards you know about, and you got so many cards I know about, but we have a couple that we don't. Who's gonna draw? It's high noon, bang bang. so used to things being higher. But yeah, Search for Ascanta going away is unfortunate. I think a lot of the flip cards from Ixalan were done really well, and I really liked them, so I'm gonna be sad to see those go, but there's always Historic. Wreckage Contempt, I fucking love this card. It's not seeing nearly as much play right now, because we have a lot of decent removal from War of the Spark and M20, but this card, I would be lying if I said this card is probably one of my most played cards in the entirety of my Arena career. I've put this card in so many decks because I play black a lot, because black's my favorite color, at least right now. And it just does what you want it to do, and it does it so well and so nicely. But sadly, it's leaving us, and well, you know what? We might be able to see it back someday. Vraska's chasing after. Is she going after Dovin? No, she might be going after Liliana. I don't remember, but still, Wreckage Contempt is just such a cool card, such an iconic card for me, because I play it and it is good. Rekindling Phoenix. This card is just value incarnate, and it leaving sucks. It's 4 mana 4/3 flyer. Phoenix text, right? Is good. Is a good card. It's just a nice value card. This is like fair magic right there, and it's going away. And I'm just generally sad. Right now, obviously, this doesn't matter. I will admit that a lot of the cards that I'm glad to see go away, they're a lot more impactful than the cards that I'm not glad or that I'm going to be sad that are going away. But at the same time, I don't care. This is my channel. I'm going to talk about the cards I want. In Phoenix, even though I didn't play with it as often because of the fact that it's red and I don't play red very often, it's still one of those cards that just does a job, and it does that job very well. And I feel like, based on what we know about Throne of Eldraine, that it's going to have some cool monsters. And having a Gruul Monsters deck that doesn't include Rekindling Phoenix it's going to feel a little wrong. Just a little. Moving on to green. Shut up. I'm actually a little sad that Wildgrowth Walker and the Explorer twins are going away. You might be saying, Theurix, you're insane. I understand that at a point in time, these were everywhere. I would rather be in that time when it was nothing but Golgari / Sultai midrange than right now when it's nothing but Bant Ramp, Simic Flash, and Esper Control. Way and above, I would prefer that metagame. Because Wildgrowth Walker and its ilk are really good value. They're ubiquitous, but they're also fair. It's doing normal baseline shit. It's just I'm gonna play a dude who gets bigger and gains me life. I like it. It's great. You can say it's a bit too ubiquitous until the cows go home, and I'll probably agree with that. But what this card did, I think, was very helpful. It put pressure on control decks, and it let you survive against aggro decks. I think this card is good. It's obviously good. It's objectively good. But it leaving is going to suck for me. Even though right now it doesn't see a ton of play. Golgari midrange is coming back, which is really strange to me. But that deck is going to be short-lived. And last, but absolutely not least, are all of the check lands. The Isolated Chapel, Glacial Fortresses, those ilk. Some from Dominaria, and the others are from Ixalan. I have no idea what Standard is going to look like when we lose these. Obviously, we're going to get something. There's no way Wizards doesn't give us more fixing out of Throne. The question is, what is that fixing going to be? And what color? Well, obviously, but what type of land is it going to be? And then what colors? Because right now we have the temples for the off color. So we have the white, black, blue, red, black, green, red, white, and green, blue. So we have those, but we don't have the allied colors anymore. I can't see Throne of Eldraine having temples in it. It just doesn't seem to fit the fairy tale theme. Also, I really hate when Wizards does that with cycles where they make it uneven, because at this point, like before, the reason we didn't have a lot of enemy cycle dual lands is because Wizard had an ethos of, you know, these are the enemy colors, they shouldn't be seen together as much because it doesn't make sense. But they backpedaled on that, and it's now just all the color combinations are the same. You know, they're enemy pairs, but they still make sense. I hate when Wizards doesn't have a full cycle of cards. The fact that we are having half cycle of temples bothers me to no end. So we'll see, you know, how that shakes up. But I'm very curious to see what we get out of Throne of Eldraine, because that can really make or break a lot of decks. You know, we may see a standard in which it's no longer viable to realistically go heavy into 3 colors. Now, you can still get away with 2 colors and a splash, but it would be very difficult, I think, for you know, possibly an Esper control or a Grixis control or a real Teamer deck, a real Teamer Elemental deck that's trying to run, you know, reds as well as greens and things like that. So, you know, we'll have to see about what the lands, wow, what the landscape looks like. And you know, that's going to be heavily modified based on what exact lands we're getting. If we get the temples, I think it's going to mean that mid-range is hopefully going to get a little bit better, because it does mean that fast perfect mana is going to be harder to come by, and the scries will matter a lot more, and, you know, things will be slowed down because of that. But if it's something else, I'm very curious to see the disparity between the enemy and allied colors. You know, having the enemies be on tap lands, and then having the allies be on potentially something that doesn't come in tap, maybe pain lands, or just as an example. They can't reprint the pain lands because they have like specific region-based names, I believe, but let's say it were, then, you know, that would completely change how you can build certain decks. You know, different types of aggro decks are going to have to be in certain colors. Different types of control decks are going to have to be in certain colors, or at least stretch their colors in such a way that accommodates for those lands. So I did say earlier how Llanowar Elf and Lightning Strikes are really pillars of the format. The lands are literally the ground that the format stands on. So we'll have to see exactly how that comes up. And now a little bit of good old-fashioned bookkeeping. We did hit 50 likes on yesterday's video, so the like streak continues. I believe we're at 2 now. I can't do math. But yes, if you would like the like streak to continue and get ridiculous rewards, the first of which will be an accent video, where I do an accent for all of the good old-fashioned talky bits with the arena content. At least I might not do it the entire time because my voice will get destroyed. But anytime I'm talking about the game, absolutely. Then keep up the likes. Make sure likes get up to 50. Yada 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 yada. I think that's it. Yeah, actually, I think that's it. I will say, one thing that's stayed true. Actually, I'm just gonna go over to this screen. That lets people know that the video is technically over and they can leave if they want. My viewership declined. Right, my overall likes decline. You know, all that subscribers literally going into the red, but whatever, it's fine. Because the like ratios have been steady. You know, the like ratios have always been in the very high 90%, meaning that the vast majority of people who are doing an action on the likes or dislikes of the video, the vast majority have been positive, and I really do appreciate that. You know, more than just the views, more than the subs, more than anything, it shows me that you do like the content more than you don't like it. So I do really appreciate that, and I hope that rewarding the likes just makes, you know, gives people not necessarily an incentive, but rewards people for I don't know, like for being nice. You know, I don't know. Whatever, too much sap. I'd like to, of course, thank my lovely patrons, especially Salamanders and Rexel, Croft, and Furry God for the continued support. If you'd like to join them in supporting the show, which really does help, you can find links to that down in the description below, or you can just press that join button, become a channel member. You get to do cool things. Mostly, you get to easier access to me on various locations. I do hope that you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think I'm super wrong about, and you know, give me all your vitriol about the Wild Growth Walker pick. But let me know what cards you're going to miss most once rotation happens, which is going to be sometime this autumn. I don't remember exactly when. I'm in the description. I will have a link to this website I use that just keeps track of standard completely. It's just like, it's literally what is standard. And it's a great resource. It's great for looking at when and what is going to leave. But let me know what you're excited about leaving, what you're sad to see go, what cards that you're sad, haven't really seen any play. For example, like Twilight Prophet. No. Yes? The 4-mana 2/5, the 2/4 vampire that like does a good old fashioned beginning of your upkeep if you have Ascension. That card like saw no play, and I'm sad because it's cool. It's a really cool card. But I do hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, go and tap that like button, add subscription, share mana pool, cast a comment in the comment section down below, pass the turn and the vid to some of your friends, and of course, until next time, all will be one.